Imagine living in North Korea. Your entire life is surrounded by lies. The government lies to the outside world, lies to its own people, and people lie to one another. All day long you work tirelessly, trying to please the great sun-faced leader of the party. And in the evenings, even among those closest to you, you're afraid to say a single word of criticism about the party, because you could be immediately sent to a local labor camp. At night, you gather fallen acorns to boil and eat later. But only at night, because even fallen acorns are considered state property, and stealing them can once again land you in prison. One morning, during a routine meeting, you don't sing the national anthem loudly or sincerely enough. You're noticed. You're beaten. You're thrown into prison and systematically tortured. Here, acorns are considered a delicacy, so you survive by eating grass, dirt, and any insects you can catch inside a cell that's barely 1 meter by 1 meter. Soon, the only thing you think about is how to stay alive for just one more day. You would probably want to leave this country. But North Korea forbids its citizens from leaving, a direct violation of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, a document the regime simply does not care about. And even if you do manage to escape, several generations of your family will be left to rot in prison. Family is, without a doubt, a powerful deterrent. But despite all the risks, the humiliation, and the suffering endured by the average North Korean, the scale of it is so overwhelming that many people still try to secure a ticket to real life. I've studied a vast amount of data to responsibly state this. There are 7 ways to escape from North Korea. Among them are the most dangerous, the most risky, the most unusual, and even the most unexpected. Before we begin, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really matters to us and motivates us to keep creating new and interesting content for you. Let's start with the first idea that comes to mind for almost anyone. Crossing the Korean Demilitarized Zone, the border that separates North and South Korea. Yes? Why not just cross a 1,250-kilometer-long demilitarized zone, essentially the most heavily guarded border in the world, monitored around the clock by nearly 2 million soldiers on both sides? Even a superficial look makes it clear that this idea is not only dangerous, but simply stupid. Most likely, you'll step on a landmine, get electrocuted, or just be shot. However, that doesn't mean crossing the border this way is completely impossible. But it's important to understand that almost all successful escapes through the demilitarized zone were carried out by soldiers, the very people assigned to guard it. So this is definitely not a method an ordinary North Korean should consider. That said, if you somehow manage to get a job guarding the border, then this becomes a very viable option. The second option is escaping North Korea by sea. Over the past 40 years, several attempts like this have been documented. People trying to reach South Korea without a passport, a visa, or any money. This option isn't without logic, because South Korea is the most obvious destination. It's well known that the South Korean government welcomes all North Korean defectors with open arms, considering them its own citizens. Overall, this is the safest option. If you escape by sea, you can depart either from the west coast or the east coast. The easiest place to set off is roughly from here. But since the authorities are well aware of this route, you'll most likely be intercepted by a naval patrol. There is a safer route that takes longer and runs far from the coastline. But it only seems safe at first glance. Weather in the open sea is unpredictable, and a lot can go wrong. And considering that you'll most likely be traveling in a small, fragile boat, your chances of surviving a storm are extremely low. You also won't have proper navigation equipment, which means ocean currents could simply carry you back to North Korea. There's another possibility. The current could take you to China, which is just as bad because China is a political and ideological ally of North Korea. You would be sent back as soon as you're caught, and you would be caught very quickly. That's why I recommend leaving from the East Coast. In some ways, conditions there are more dangerous, but unlike the West Coast, if you manage to cover this distance, you'll end up in Japanese territorial waters. The Japanese, unlike the Chinese, are not communists and will definitely not send you back. From there, you can safely continue your journey to South Korea. There is one more option where North Korean naval patrols are very unlikely to notice you. You can try to reach South Korea by swimming. Many open sources say that in this scenario you'll most likely freeze or drown, but it is possible to choose a short route. The distance between North Korea and some South Korean islands can be less than 10 kilometers. For example, news recently surfaced that one fisherman swam for 6 hours and actually made it. The next 3 methods all have one thing in common. They are all connected, in one way or another, to crossing the northern border into China. This border is much safer than the Demilitarized Zone. Well, safer is a relative term. It's like choosing between being locked in a cage with a bear or with a king cobra. Neither option is good, but at least you have a choice. You can cross either the Yalu River or the Tumen River. Both form the border between North Korea and China. The Tumen River is more popular because crossing it is easier. But even there, most people don't make it across alive. Border guards can hide underground, aiming their weapons upward through small openings, waiting for the right moment to fill you with bullets. That's why sometimes you can see bodies floating downstream, the bodies of those who didn't make it. But even if you do reach China alive, your problems are far from over. As I mentioned before, the Chinese government will most likely catch you and deport you back. And if they don't, there's a high chance you'll fall into the hands of human traffickers. And here, that's an entire market. If you're a man, you'll be sent to log forests or work in mines. If you're a woman, you'll become a prostitute. Or, if you're lucky, you'll be sold as a wife to a rural Chinese farmer. I say lucky because, realistically, this isn't the worst possible outcome. At least you'll have a roof over your head and food on the table. And that's still far better than life in North Korea. If you do manage to avoid human trafficking, you'll be forced to adapt to life on the run, living in slums. You won't be able to work legally, and you won't have access to medical care. So there's a very real chance you'll simply die on the street. Either way, if you choose this path, China should never be your final destination. However, there are 2 places in China where you can get help: the South Korean Embassy and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Both are located in Beijing, and there you will be helped to reach South Korea. But once again, it's not that simple. Chinese police often monitor both the South Korean Embassy and the UN office, so most likely you'll be arrested right at the door. However, if you're lucky enough to make it inside, Chinese authorities can't detain you, because legally, embassy grounds are inviolable. In practice, though, there's another problem. Even if South Korea approves your escape, at some point you'll still have to leave the embassy in order to board a plane and fly to Seoul. A plane obviously won't be brought to the embassy for you, so you'll have to reach the airport through Chinese territory. And at that point, you'll most likely be detained anyway. Which brings us to the next best option. Somehow make your way to a third country, one that has close ties with South Korea, and ideally, minimal ties with North Korea, so you can reach a South Korean embassy without fearing arrest or deportation. This is where the Asian Underground Railroad comes into play. It's a dangerous network of underground and overland routes. Very little is known about it, but it's believed to lead through China's underground networks to safe havens in Southeast Asia. However, countries in Southeast Asia treat North Korea very differently. Vietnam, Cambodia, and Myanmar are not the best options. You'll be deported there as well. Thailand, on the other hand, is relatively safe. They will still deport you, but the good news is that it will be to South Korea, not North Korea. Even so, this won't be an easy journey. One way or another, you'll have to cross Chinese territory without being noticed. You can be identified by your clothing, by not speaking Chinese, or even by your height. On average, North Koreans are shorter than Chinese people due to long-term malnutrition. The next route goes through the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. It's a vast region in northern China and southern Mongolia, known for its dunes, mountains, and extreme temperatures, where snow leopards, bears, and even wolves roam from time to time. This path can't exactly be called comfortable, but at least it's much shorter than the previous one. In addition, Mongolia, unlike some other Asian countries, is sympathetic to North Korean refugees, often sending them straight to South Korea with minimal bureaucratic hurdles. The next option is Europe. It's very safe there, and if you can get there with the help of the UN, activists, and charities, things can actually go very well. The only catch is that you'll need to prove you're really North Korean. The status of a North Korean refugee comes with so many benefits that many other Asians pretend to be North Korean. It may sound absurd, but the checks are so strict that many real North Koreans were mistaken for Chinese and sent back to China, and from there, of course, back to Korea. Damn, I can't even imagine how frustrating that must be. But if you're lucky, you'll join fellow North Korean refugees. Right now, there are about 2,000 of them living in Europe. Very few people try to go there, because people are so deeply indoctrinated by propaganda that even in these conditions, they still see the United States as the evil empire. But even if you don't have those biases, there's a second problem. This route is extremely long and full of bureaucracy. And all that time, you'll have to wait somewhere else, possibly for years. And during those years, literally anything can happen. We know the story of one North Korean who made it through the Asian Underground Railroad to Thailand. But when he found out the waiting period could take many years, he decided to get on a boat to Argentina instead. He then crossed the Mexican border with a group of Mexicans, and now he is a U.S. citizen. The next method doesn't require illegally crossing a single border. North Korea sends its workers to other countries, including Poland and Russia. In practice, these people are slaves, rented out by Kim to earn money for things like building new missiles. And in these labor camps, you'll be treated like a slave as well. Food will be scarce, and you'll most likely be living in the cold, somewhere in Siberia. But your chances of escaping and staying alive are actually higher. At the very least, you won't have to run through minefields under a hail of bullets. Of course, if it were that simple, many more people would have escaped. The problem is that before you're allowed to go on such work assignments, the North Korean government subjects you to extensive screening. You must be in good physical condition. You must prove your loyalty to the party. And most importantly, you must be married and have children. In effect, your family is taken hostage. Every North Korean understands that if they escape, their relatives will be left to rot in prison. But even that doesn't stop everyone. And finally, we've reached the last option, one that's very different from all the others. This is where the North Korean elite come into play. They have security and stability, which is why defections from this group are relatively rare. But they do happen. Here, the driving force isn't hunger or poverty, but intellectual freedom or political beliefs. No matter how poor a country is, there are always people from the privileged class, those working for the North Korean government, the military, or state-owned companies abroad. Because of this, they have far greater access to information about how life can be different. And despite total state control, even a brief glimpse of how the rest of the world works can divide your life into before and after. And after that, there may be no way back. This is especially true for the younger generation, those who still have ambition and dreams. So if you belong to the Pyongyang elite and decide to defect, it becomes much easier. You have money to pay intermediaries who can secretly get you out of the country. And if you're stopped by border guards, you can simply bribe them. You can also afford a fake South Korean passport. So even if you're stopped by, say, Chinese police, Carrying a Louis Vuitton bag and wearing Ray-Ban sunglasses, you'll inspire far more trust than most of your fellow countrymen. It's even easier if you're a student studying abroad. In that case, escaping becomes much simpler. Although even delegations traveling abroad are always kept on a very short leash. So you will still have to be extremely careful. And don't forget what will happen to your family if you escape. I could only find one case where an escape truly succeeded without any major obstacles. It was the former deputy ambassador of North Korea to the United Kingdom. He managed to convince the state to allow him to bring his wife and children to London. Being a high-ranking member of the regime, he was able to make it happen. And immediately afterward, he flew to South Korea with his entire family. He is now considered the most high-profile North Korean defector in recent times. His success was a huge blow to North Korea. After his escape, North Korean state media reacted as they usually do to save face. They convicted him in absentia, accusing him of embezzlement, espionage, and, of course, pedophilia. That said, even this method comes with a catch. No escape is completely risk-free. The government will try very hard to reach you anywhere in the world. And sometimes they succeed. Take, for example, Kim's half-brother, who was tracked down and assassinated at a Malaysian airport in 2017. Thanks for watching. Please like this video.